Greetings and welcome to the basement. In this quick little video, we're going to take a look at setting up a NavMesh and just having a basic unit wandering around on the NavMesh. As a setup to this is a project that I'm currently working on in RTS, in which I can take a unit and right-click and have it meander on over. And if you want a more complex path, I could say take this unit and tell it to go over there to this building. And you can see it avoids the building that was in front of it and successfully navigates that little twisty curvy path to come to rest where it is supposed to. So how would we set something up like that? Well, let's get a new scene and take a look at this from scratch. Now I am going to use ProBuilder to construct the level. It honestly doesn't matter. A basic Unity cube works just as fine for a sample like this. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up, grab a cube. I want a nice big area. So I'm just going to make this one gigantic. Well, I was going to do 15 by 15, but you know 16 by 16 works just as good. I'm going to build that out. And of course, I'm going to want this back at the origin like I always do. And I'm also going to want some smaller cubes to act as blocks. You know what, let's make this a little bit smaller. 2 by 2. Just 2 by 2 cubes. There we go. So I shall build that. And snap to contact. Remember, Control Shift drag on the white square does a snap to contact. There we go. And for my little character that I'll have walking around here, I'll just use a Unity primitive on this one, actually. I'll just drop in a capsule. Yeah, you can, come on, get up. Always forget which pivot is it. Center, there we go. You have pivot center and you do snap to contact. It makes the Unity primitives actually snap to contact. This will be our character. Of course, I would like to know which way is forward. So on him, I will place a cube, which I will drastically scale down. And this will sort of serve as the face. So that way I can see which direction my little guy is pointing. And then to finish setting things up here, I am going to just, for a little bit of organization, because it's always a good idea, create a level collection in which I will put in all of my level objects into that. And I'm going to need a empty game object. So I just want that to be visual. I don't want that to actually collide with anything. So I am going to create an empty at the same exact location. Remember, this is a handy little trick. If I want an empty game object at the same spot where this capsule is, I can create an empty object as a child, break the parent link. That is now in exactly the same spot, so I can flip things around here. And there we go. I have my character. I'm going to go ahead and save this scene. And I'm ready to go. So the first step here is you need to make sure that you have the navigation window open. You can open up this window by going to Whelp Window, AI, Navigation. Now it is worth noting that the navigation that they have that default inside of the Unity is a little bit out of date. If you are willing to go to the GitHub repositories that Unity maintains, there is a more advanced navigation system that they have that has some more features. It's a little bit nicer, but if you're just using very basic, I've got a static level that I need agents to navigate across, this works just fine. You only need the other version if you need to build these nav meshes at runtime. That is where the default nav mesh system fails pretty hard. So keep that in mind. As long as everything can be done at edit time, this version's probably just fine. If you need NavMesh for runtime generation, no, do not use this system. It's more hassle than it's worth. With that dire warning out of the way, we've got our navigation window open. What are our windows? Well, we can define agents. Agents are the things that move around here. It has this sort of default agent definition here, which meshes relatively well with our little person here. Of course, I think he's only a 1 unit high capsule. Drag him over here to the 2 unit high. Yep, no, he's a 2 unit high. So, yeah, the default humanoid definition here pretty much matches the default capsule size, which also matches what the default character controller assumes a character is. So it all lines up nice and neat. Areas, you can have up to 32 areas. In other words, this is using bit flag logic to determine layers. As you can see here, I've already defined one custom user layer here. You can use this to define a variety of things. Obviously, the name doesn't mean anything, but you can define the cost, so that way you can discourage units from going through something unless it really is the best option. Bake, of course, is where we actually tell the system to bake the NavMesh. And we pass in the agent information here as to what agent do we want to use to bake things. And then finally, we can set in settings here for different objects, specifically the ability to set whether or not it has a navigation area, what should we do with it, things like that. Now notice at the moment I can't actually set any of these except for navigation static. And if I come over here to the bake option and I click on the bake command, nothing happens. By default, the NavMesh system wants static objects. And so if I want this to actually NavMesh out this area here, I need to take all of these objects and mark them as static. And I don't mean static colliders, which they are at the moment. Always keep that in mind. There's static colliders, and then there's the game object being static. These are different. Always keep that in mind. These are static colliders at the moment. They have a collider on them with no rigid body. Static collider. However, the game objects themselves are not static. And so for that, I could either select them all individually, or I could select the top level parent object, mark it static, and tell it, yes, I want to change children as well. And now all of these objects are static. Keep in mind, this has lighting implications. If you have a bunch of real-time lights lighting up your level, marking everything as static will take those out of the real-time lighting information. So, there's you got to watch out for the lighting. There are definitely lighting impacts here. I didn't say that exactly right, but this isn't a lighting video, so moving on. Just be aware that marking things static has light mapping implications. Now that everything has been marked static, I can come back over to my navigation window, my bake tab, hit bake, and with such a small little level, it should go pretty darn fast. And you can see here that these little cubes have cut out little sections, indicating that, yeah, right around this area here, you can't walk. This does have some rather important implications. So like, say, if I was to take this floor, let me duplicate it, move it out. Let me take one of these cubes, duplicate it, move it over here, take this cube, duplicate it, move it over here, and let's make, probably easier with this angle, let's make these guys really close and extend them out a little bit here like so. Again, I'm using Pro Builder for ease of use, but all of this could also just as easily be done with standard Unity cubes and scaling. I bake it. Notice now we have a couple of things. One, this space in between here is not walkable by the NavMesh agent. Now, if I move it over a little bit, come on. Also, notice as I move this, the NavMesh does not automatically update. Anytime that you move something, you have to manually update the NavMesh. You don't have to clear it. You can just click on Bake and it will rebake. And notice now I've got a little bit of a space there. If I move it in, it's a bit more narrow. Move it in. And eventually I can cause this to just disappear. There we go. Now there's no longer any space there. Depending on your character controller, a player might be able to force their way through there, but the NavMesh agent is saying, nah, ain't gonna happen. Also notice that on top of my elongated cubes now, I have a walkable area. NavMesh doesn't really care about, or at least by default, doesn't care about connections or heights or anything else like that. It's going to go, oh yeah, that surface is large enough for something to walk on it. I'll put some NavMesh there. So if you don't want that, we have to change some settings. So again, if I come over here to Object, I can set settings for individual objects. So I can select this cube here, and I can change its navigation area to not walkable. And then I can do the same. Well, actually, I should probably do the same for all of these squares and change their navigation zone to not walkable. Now, when I bake it, I no longer have the NavMesh area on top of those surfaces. Also keep in mind when it comes to setting things, this is on a per object basis. I can't just select this area right here to mark as a slow. I can select this entire floor, and I can mark that entire floor as a slow zone with a cost of 5. But I can't change individual little pieces there. So really, and let me change this back here to walkable. Say I had, oops, I thought I duplicated that. Apparently I did not. Duplicate. Use some vertex snapping here to speed that up. So say we had something like this setup. Oops, and I do actually want you back to flow zone. So I've got this zone here. For whatever reason, I have declared that this has a higher cost than everything else. And then we've got all of this just regular cost area. What would happen if I had this character here and I told, let's see here, move him here actually. If I had the character here and I told it to move the character, told the character to move here, what would happen? Well, let's find out. And for that, we're actually going to need to get the character to move. Now, before we move on to coding, there is a very important step that we have to do, and that is we have to add a component to our character here. Actually, there's a couple of things. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a capsule collider. Which for some reason wants to be quite strange. Yeah, I don't know why my capsule was off center there. That was odd. All right, fix that. This capsule should not have any offsets on position. I'm not entirely sure how that happened. So character, capsule, the capsule collider should have a height of 2. And you notice now that makes it, let me just offset it here just so we could see. That makes the capsule collider perfectly fit to the whelp capsule because that's what it's for. I also need this to be a dynamic. I need this to be not static in terms of collider. So I'm going to add on a rigid body. And since I'm going to be controlling this through code, it is going to be a kinematic rigid body. I am not concerned about triggers or anything like that, messages in this particular demo, so this will be good enough. The next thing that I need to add on is I need to add on a NavMesh agent. This is where the agent types come into play. We can define different types, say sizes for small characters or large characters or big tanks or small tanks, so on and so forth. So we can define different agent types and assign them this way. And then we've got some fairly basic options here, which I will go over in another video. I want to keep this one very short and sweet. So let's get this character moving. So I'm going to add on a script, which I shall call demo move. And then open that up. In Visual Studio. Now, at its most basic level, you just simply set the destination on the NavMesh agent. So I'm going to need a point. So I'm going to say public transform move target. And then in my start method here, I'm going to grab the NavMesh agent. Now you'll notice as I start typing here, there's no NavMesh agent, which is strange because remember the rule of thumb is we look at the component name and that's the name we type into code. So I should be able to type in NavMesh agent and see it. Always remember that when you run into a scenario like this, where it's like, okay, I know NavMesh agent is the name, why is it not showing up? The immediate assumption you should have is, oh, there must be a namespace issue in there, and go look it up in the scripting reference. In this particular case, I happen to know exactly where this is. It's unityengine.ai dot, not slash. And there we go. There's all our nav stuff. So NavMesh agent. So I need to get that component. Just tab it in because that was the last thing that I accessed. And then I set the destination to whatever that happens to be. Oh, whoops. And that does need to actually be a position. There we go. So agent.setDestination. Now, of course, I actually need to create said destination. So we'll keep this off simple at first. Now, you do not need to use a visible object for this. I am using a visible object just so that way I have something to see. I am going to take away the sphere collider. I just want a visual representation of where this is. Scale it down there a bit. Then come over here to my character and tell it. Let's collapse some of these things down. Don't need all of these open. And there's remove target. Great. So I hit the play button. And forget that I never reset my camera. Control-Shift-F. Now I hit the play button. There we go. And he moves straight there. And apparently I need to modify my anchor points here because he is... Yep, as you can see there, my base needs to be offset down by 1, so that way the base is behaving itself. There you go. He moves straight there. So let's see what happens when I move my little target point over there. Move straight to it. Now let's see what happens if I move it over here. Looks like it's a little bit closer for him to go around this way, but will it? Nope, it's going to go around the long way. Why? Because this is a cost 5 area, and so when it does the calculations, it's like, nah, no, it's actually better for me to go around this way. Oh, whoops. I moved it underneath the ground there. Pop it back up. So now it's even closer. Now it's close enough that's like, yeah, that little bit of a detour through the cost 5 area is worth it. And there you go. That is the basics of using the navigation system that is built into Unity. So to recap, your geometry, level geometry, should be static. Upon making your geometry static, you go into the navigation area. You need to define your agent if it's going to be something other than the Unity character controller default. Define areas as necessary. And then bake the NavMesh. If you have the NavMesh window open, you should see the NavMesh present if it has been successfully baked. And then you can specify individual objects with whether or not they are a walkable area or not based on what you want. In terms of getting an object to move, you simply need to have a NavMesh agent component on the object that you want to move, and you use set destination on the NavMesh agent component and pass in a vector3 to get it to move to that position. At its simplest, that is all there is to the NavMesh system. Of course, there is more complexity involved. You can right-click like I initially showed to get things to move based on mouse clicks. You can have things chase, follow patrol patterns, etc., etc. But at the base, that's all there is to it. And that's it for this video. If this has been useful information, go ahead and hit that like button. If you already knew everything that I just said, well, you know, the dislike button's right over there. Until next time.